First up, Manny, Riverside, California, listening on NRB television. Hi, Manny.
Hey, Hank, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm blessed, man. I enjoy your show. On NRB, comes out crystal clear. Thanks for that.
You got it.
Here's my question. Bible manuscripts. I got saved in King James only church, and I left that and got involved with a non-denominational group and went into King James. And the past 3 years, I've just been looking at these different versions, Bible translations, a lot of confusion going on. What do you recommend? What are your thoughts on Bible translation? What would be a good translation to teach out of, and where you're getting the whole picture as opposed to maybe a couple of verses being omitted or maybe even not even flowing right? What do you think about that? And what translation is it that you like?
Well, that's a good question. Let me answer the latter part of that question first. I use various translations for various purposes. For example, I love the melodic nature of the King James Version. It's inherently memorable. There's a certain cadence to it, and I love Elizabethan English. So from that perspective, I'm very fond of the KJV. But I would never, ever subscribe to KJV only. I want to go with the best manuscript evidence that is extant today. And one has to remember that the KJV was commissioned by King James I in 1604 and not completed in 1611. Since then, there have been discoveries of manuscripts which have, in a very real way, enhanced our understanding of the biblical text. Now, there aren't substantive changes, but there are some changes, and some of them are stylistic, because words that were denotative in Elizabethan English are now connotative, and therefore the words have been changed such that we understand what they mean. For example, if you look, I think it's Acts chapter 28, it says that Paul from thence fetched a compass. Well, what does that mean? Compasses were not extant in the Western world, and even in the Eastern world were largely unheard of. They weren't invented except in the Chinese sense. And so we have little sense of understanding what from thence we fetched a compass means. So the new translators in the modern translations, they say, well, that means he proceeded in a circular course, which of course he did. And so they take it from the connotative back to the denotative, so we understand what it means. Some of it, of course, has to do with as I mentioned, the discovery of newer, more ancient manuscripts, newer in the sense that they weren't extant before, more ancient in the sense that they're older. So I think that that has helped us understand things about the Bible, even some of the uses of words in the Old Testament. So I don't subscribe to King James Version only. I think King James is a very good version. But the newer translations are useful as well. If I'm going to be memorizing the book of Proverbs, which is pithy, I would do so in the NASB because it is more in the standard of a formal equivalency than a dynamic equivalency. If I'm going to quote the Sermon on the Mount, as I have in various places around the world, I'd do it using the NIV because it sounds more like I'm just talking. So for the one, I want the more pithy. For the other, I want it more understandable in the street language of our day. But as far as omitting verses, if, for example, you don't have the comma Johannium in the newer versions, although it is usually in the footnotes, the reason is because it isn't found in the older, more reliable manuscripts. So it's not a matter of omitting it, because the concept is carried elsewhere in Scripture, but it is recognizing that the oldest, most reliable manuscripts don't include it to begin with. I've written about this in various places. Where you can get a pretty good overview of this is in my book, Has God Spoken?, which is available through the ministry of the Christian Research Institute.